For me, it's Monday morning, Bill.
That's true. That's true. Hey, I'm still I'm still working from home for 2 years now, so
Oh wow, where's
I don't
home?
Long Island.
Oh wow, yeah,
Yeah, so I don't have to get up at 4:45 anymore to take the train in.
nice, huh?
Well, for now at least.
For now, yeah,
It's been nice, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, Arrow, you there?
You've gotten lazy, haven't you, Bill?
Why would you say that? I've only put on 50 pounds of COVID weight, that's all.
Yeah, but wouldn't you say, Don Winslow, that what Bill is going through is what writers go through? Because when we step into that writing space, I mean, we go into our own zone, and creativity just
Yes.
flourishes.
You know what? I COVID in terms of work made very little difference to me, and I know how crass that sounds, but isolation's been a writer's work tactic forever. So I spend most all of my days, in a room with people who don't actually exist.
But I love that feeling though, because I mean, in my mind they do exist. That's why I like that movie Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, because I'm allowed to step inside that zone.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But then you go home and your wife will not speak the lines that you've written for her.
What do you do in situations like that? Because I mean, I defrag a lot during the day because I want to break things down. But I'll do that. I'll
Yeah.
say, why didn't this person react the way that I thought they should have reacted?
I know, it's frustrating because if they don't do it when I'm writing, I delete them. And apparently you're not allowed to do that in real life.
that
It's
that's
frowned upon.
that's one
So,
of the reasons why I like to use a writing instrument. I'll go out and buy a Mont Blanc for every writing project that I do, and then this way
is that right?
I never
Wow.
use it again. But I have it on paper so that if I do go in there and erase it, then but yeah, I can't, not with a pen. But
Can't.
when I do the editing part, that's when things start going away.
Yeah, I have this file. It's called whatever stuff, whatever book I'm working on, right? And so it'll be City on Fire stuff. And so I'll delete like 10 pages because I don't think it's working. But then I put it into stuff, thinking, well, I could be wrong and maybe I want this later. You know?
Well, I love moments like that because I mean you're right. I mean it's like even when Paul McCartney writes his music, he puts he doesn't use real words when he's writing songs like Yesterday. He's just sitting there just putting whatever goes in there. It's that stuff like you're talking about that actually could be inspired the next book.
No, exactly. And I'll never forget. It was a story about some famous photographer who said, when you've got the perfect shot and then you're walking back to get your coffee and you kick the light stand, he said, look through the lens before you put it back the way it was, because you might have just hit on something better.
It's almost like we've lived this life before. And do you feel like that as a writer, that the reason why stories move through you is because you've been here before?
I do. I hate to admit that, but every once in a while I do get that crazy, Yogi Berra deja vu all over again feeling, you know, like, wow, this seems familiar and there's no reason it should.
So now in the book City on Fire, we're talking about two criminal empires. I actually sat there while I was reading it, and I felt like that it doesn't have to be a criminal empire. I mean, it's just empires in general are going
Yeah.
through this.
Yeah. Well, the story is inspired by the Iliad and the Aeneid and other works from the classics. I
Oh.
wanted to see that if I could take those great themes, because look, by the time the Greeks and the Romans were finished, they'd done it all. If all the themes that we deal with in my beloved crime genre were already done. And I wanted to see if I could write a fully modern crime novel so you could read it without reference or knowledge of the classics, but based on those themes. So your questions hit on it exactly. It's based on the Greeks and the Trojans.
Now,
You know, yeah. Go ahead.
I was
Sorry.
going to say, but as that writer, do you ever cameo inside your stories?
Me?
Yeah. Do you ever
No,
appear in those stories? No.
no, no. I wish I had a Bible here on the table that I could put my hand on it and swear that I'm none of these characters. Now, some people would disagree. I was at a book event one time years ago. My early books featured a guy named Neil Carey, and someone in the audience asked, "Are you Neil Carey?" And I was like shaking my head, and I look at the back of the room, and my wife was vigorously nodding. You know, and I said, "What do you mean? He's whiny." And,
So in those moments where the spouse is involved, one of the things that I don't do is share my writing with my wife because sometimes I think
Right.
she's too blunt. Do you go through things like that as well? Where I mean, because even Julia Cameron will say, "Don't share your stuff with family members."
I do not. I do not. My wife's an interior commercial designer. I don't look at her sketches. She doesn't look at my manuscripts. And we've been married for 37 years. So I think it's a good plan, you know?
That's like when I'm podcasting and stuff like that, and I know she's in the room next door. I won't be my normal self. I start talking like this. So it's like I don't want
Yeah.
her to hear me.
You go into your FM voice,
That's it.
right?
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, it's very nice to be here today. Thank you very much. Uh, I don't think she's that interested. You know what I
Mm.
mean? To like listen in. She's got her own life and her own thing, and she comes to some of the events if it's a city that she wants to go to, or she has friends there. But otherwise, no.
So now, who is Danny Ryan inside your imagination? Because you are the seed popper. I mean, you're the one that had to bring this character forward, and to bring characters forward, especially since you're working with a series and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
this guy's gotta have some pop.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is a trilogy, so when you start it. And by the way, I wrote the first sentence 27 years ago.
Oh my God!
Uh, yeah, right. Uh, you know that you've got to really like him and more importantly, understand him. And Danny's starts the books as a longshoreman, loosely connected with the Irish mob in Providence, Rhode Island, where I grew up, and he marries into the crime family. And because of that, out of loyalty, which is Danny's tragic flaw, its greatest quality and his tragic flaw, he gets involved in a crime war versus the Italian mafia in New England. And so we watch him go from this kind of regular working guy, into a mob killer, and that's Danny.
So how does this play out in your heart? Because there have been many times when my fingers have been on that keyboard, and it's like I stop breathing when things like this begin to happen. When you start really bringing that character into situations that feel like the real life.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. You feel it intensely, and you almost want to hold back a little bit, like Danny, don't do it. But that's not the story. That's not the story that we're supposed to tell, you know. And so you continue on, and as you're aware, some scenes are tougher to write than others.
So one of the things that I have a tough time dealing with is relinquishing it to the readers in the way that it's
Mhm.
like, Danny now belongs to us now. I mean, I
Right.
realize he started inside your imagination, but he
Yeah.
belongs to us now.
Yep, absolutely. I probably write somewhere between 10 to 14 drafts.
Mm,
And on early drafts, I'm not thinking about the reader at all. Don't care. It's a completely
yep,
selfish act.
yep.
But the later that I get in that process, the more I'm thinking about the reader. And by the last few drafts, that's all I'm thinking about. How does this fall on the reader's ear? How does it fall on the reader's eye? Is it comprehensible? You know, uh, the pace of it, the rhythm of it, is that going to hold the reader's attention? And make for a good read. And I believe, like you do, once that book is out there, it does belong to the reader. Whatever his or her interpretation is the correct one. Yeah, go ahead.
I,
Sorry.
I I was gonna say I so relate with that because in radio, I mean, before the you can show prep all day you want, and the thing is that but when it comes to the delivery, who is she? What is her name? What is she doing right now? What is his job? And you try to put yourself in their position so that you can become a part of their life. So aren't we in a way kind of schizophrenic and as creative people?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, here's the way I view my job. My job is to take people into a world that they otherwise couldn't enter,
Right.
or if they could, maybe show it to them in a different way. And the way that I choose to do that is to see that world through the character's eyes, right? I want my reader inside the character's head, inside the character's hearts, and seeing the world through the character's point of view. So it's almost triply schizophrenic. There's the creative process, and occasionally I step outside of that point of view to be the narrator.
Hmm.
Um, But most of the time I'm writing in what I'm told is called the close third person. I don't know. I've never had a writing class. I don't know all these terms, but uh, I write in the third person voice, but very, very tight from the character's point of view. But then I have to step outside of that, right, and try to hear it and see it as the reader.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
So now, one of the questions that I wanted to bring up, because Danny seems to be so strong, and yet, is Danny actually weak trying to be strong, and we're believing in the strong because we don't want to believe in the weak?
I think it's an evolution with him.
Yeah.
I think that he begins weak, and by the way, would probably admit to that,
Oh.
would probably identify that way. You know, look, he's the son-in-law, right? And he's sort of tolerated by the crime boss because he's married to his daughter. But as the plot develops, we see him getting stronger and stronger and tougher. And by book three, particularly, this is a very, very strong, in control guy.
So how do you bridge the gap in the way of creating book one, book two, book three in the way that you've got to create cliffhangers for that reader to go, oh my god, I can't wait.
Yeah, in this case, by the way, it was pretty easy. I always saw this as a trilogy. I always saw Danny's life in three distinct phases,
Wow.
and each of those phases ended with what's next. You know, and so it really, I hate to admit this. I'd rather say, yeah, it was hard work and very skillful planning on my part, but I always saw it that way, and it was a natural kind of division.
So your writing, did it start off as what I call word doodling, and all of a sudden these paragraphs started telling stories? You're going, okay, here we go.
Yep, exactly that. I had this. I was reading the Iliad, and it struck a memory of a very similar Helen of Troy kind of incident that had actually happened in New England. And I imagine this guy watching this woman. He's laying on the beach, yeah, watching this beautiful woman come out of the water, and somehow knowing that everything was going to change. And and that sentence, as I said, it's 27 years ago, and I put this book down, and picked it back up again, and for years and years, when I was busy writing these three big books about the drug trade, and I wrote a big book about the NYPD,
Yeah.
and then I finally had the time and the space to really sit down and work on these books.
So was it the typical where it's like you put it away, but when you would, let's say several months go by, it's like just picking it up. I mean, you knew exactly where
Yeah,
you were, and it's like no
yeah,
time had ever gone by.
yeah, exactly. Sometimes it'd be years between
Yep.
picking it up.
Yep.
I'd finish another book, or there'd be an afternoon where I didn't feel like working on the book I was working on. So I'd say, oh, let's check in with Danny, let's write a little bit of that. And that's exactly the way it was. Yeah.
So,
Until recently, like the last 2 years. And then I really just focused on these books.
well, it becomes the soundtrack of your life, is what it does. Some people have music, we have words in front of us.
Exactly. Exactly.
And to deal with that, I mean, people outside of your circle or outside your imagination don't understand that, I mean, I sit there with a writing desk on my lap all the time because words just won't stop flowing.
Isn't it the truth, man? It's sometimes at night, you're trying to sleep and you just say, shut up. Would you just shut up? But you do live in that world, and I don't talk to even good friends. We'll say politely, what are you working on now? And I'll just give them a sentence,
Yeah.
because I think you can either write about it or talk about it. It's very hard to do both.
Do you ever give them the answer when they ask, where does this all come from? I don't know. I just I because you can't explain it. There's no real explanation.
We all get asked that question all the time, right? I'm sure I'm going to be asked it 5 times this morning, and it's a natural question. I get it, it's not a dumb question, but the honest to God answer is I don't know.
Yes.
You know, I'm just grateful that it does, and but the the other real answer though is pretty boring. Is that we work on it, right? I'm at my desk at 5:30 in the morning. Whether I feel quote inspired,
Yep.
closed quote or not. I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna type. And a lot of times, you might be an hour or two in before you type your way into anything decent or anything productive.
Yeah.
But that's the gig, that's the job.
So many people don't understand that daily discipline because I'm with you. I'm a morning writer as well, and I've had to
Hmm.
retrain myself to do the defrag journal in the afternoon only because I just want to break it down. I want to understand. I want to make sure the paint on the wall is the right color and it smells
Right.
like this and all that stuff. And if I don't break it down,
Yeah.
then I'm going to get it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I think that, given my schedule, by about 2 in the afternoon, I know I'm probably not going to write anything
Yep.
new that's decent.
Yep.
It happens sometimes, but not very often. And so then I use that time to go back and do exactly what you're talking about. Some days I'll just look at verbs, right? I'll go
Yeah.
back over a couple of chapters and I'll just look at the verbs, and say, is that the best verb? Is it accurate? Can I do better? Or nouns, or I go through just deleting adverbs. It's just lazy writing. You know,
Did you ever
I
get did you ever get addicted to it, the thesaurus? Because I mean, when I mean, because I'll sit there and I'll go, "There's got to be a better way that I can say this."
yes, sometimes I go to thank you for I can't pronounce it. Um, it's too early in the
Yeah.
morning. I go to that book. Of course, now they're all on computer, but not very often. I will often go to the dictionary to check that I've used a word accurately.
Hmm.
That I just haven't been lazy and just slobbered some word out there. I got to make sure that it means what it's
Oh
supposed to.
my God, I have become addicted to when you say that using the word accurately. I will sit there and I will look up a word in the dictionary and I'll sit there and do several pages just on that word to make sure that I know the history of it, that I'm using it correctly, and that when other people are around me, I'm going to go, there's a better way that you can use that word.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, that's the craft, and that's what makes it hopefully fall easily on the reader's ear.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
So do you
Yeah,
when because in radio I can't see a listener. In writing you can't see your reader. How is it that you're
right.
able to still feed your soul?
Look, I mean, we didn't do it during COVID, but most books we go out on the road, and we actually meet and see our readers. I met a couple of hundred of them yesterday here in
Oh.
LA at the LA Book Fair, and it's been a while. And sometimes, Arrow, it was like seeing old friends. They'd come up, they go, "Oh, hey, yeah, wow, it's been a minute," And so I kind of have a mental image of who my readers are,
Hmm.
you know, and that kind of helps. And every once in a while, if I'm having trouble with a sequence, I will literally picture one or two of the readers, and just try to imagine that I'm sitting with them over coffee or something, or in a bar or at a diner, and I'm telling them the story.
So what would have happened if the writer inside of you in the middle of this trilogy would have said, I don't want to do this story on the East Coast. I'm living in L.A. I'm going to talk about the gangs in L.A. or the the groups of people here rather than on the East Coast
Yeah.
because so many people have written about the East Coast gangs.
Yeah, well, the book starts in Rhode Island,
Yep.
uh, and I did that very deliberately because A, it's my home and I know it so well, and we live there half the year, but also because the world of the mafia there is so small that
Mm.
everybody knows everybody, and that was important for the way this book works.
Mm.
But then our guy Danny leaves, and if you know the story of Troy, you know why. And he has to wander. He's literally on the run. And so the second book takes place in Hollywood, takes place mostly in LA, still
Hmm.
some scenes elsewhere. And the third book is in Las Vegas
Wow. So do
because I'm
did
greedy,
yeah.
right?
So then are you the type of writer that's got to go to the scene to be able to do it, or are you able to
Oh,
do enough Google research?
well, here's the thing. I'm very much into locales, and I always go to the scene.
Nice, nice.
Always, always. And I've like recovered mistakes. I did a book called The Force, and I had a guy sitting in a restaurant in Harlem, and seeing something happening on the street. So I went back to that restaurant before I turned the draft in, and realized that from the seat that he was sitting, he couldn't see what I said he saw. You
Oh, yeah, because
right?
you know those
So I
readers
had to
will pick up
go.
on that. Those readers will pick up on that, and then there's nothing you can do about it because it's already in print.
No, that's right. And I was so glad I went, you know. Or I did a big scene on the National Mall in Washington, right? And I walked it with my wife for hours. And I would put her in one position and me in another to make sure that the firing angles I had were possible and the sight lines that I had were possible. Having said that, you can get on an airplane or in a car, but you can't get in a time machine yet.
Right. Yeah, Elon Musk is working on that. Trust me.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. And so, and so you do have to go back. You know, it's not necessarily Google. Sometimes it is, but you know, you go back to books and magazines and newspapers, and you know, look at okay, what was there then? I did a book, scenes of which were set in Saigon in 1958,
Wow.
and so the research was immense, but I would cut out photos of buildings and I created a map on a big rollout sheet of paper that I'd roll out on my mother's porch in Rhode Island. And I glued the buildings to the map. And so when my character came out of his hotel, if he turned right or left, I knew what he was walking past.
Wow.
You know, if he had to go to a drugstore, I knew where it was. You know, and so you know to go back in this book, the trilogy starts in 87, 86, and ends in 97, 1997. You know, you had to go back and check on those things. You know, what was there? What was the music that was playing?
Yep. Yep.
You know, if he turns on the radio, what's going to come on? You know, and particularly, you know, like in Vegas, and that was tricky. What was actually there? You know, what were because it was an era of great both demolition and building, which is part of what the book's about. And so what existed? You know.
Wow. I love where your heart is, dude. I love your writing. I love everything that you're planting. You got to come back to the
Thank you.
show anytime in the future, John. Don, the door is always going to
Well,
be open for you.
thank you, man. I really enjoyed our conversation, so I'll come back anytime. Just ask.
Absolutely. Well, you be brilliant today,
All
okay,
right.
sir?
I'm gonna try. That's a high bar to jump, but we will do our best, Arrow, and you too.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Bye bye.